The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Coturri, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Oh, very poetic sounding pour this morning.
The first stanza is Dane Seller's Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, like it says on my book, Robert Louis Stevenson, wine is bottled
the
poetry.
Wine is bottled poetry.
How cool
I feel like
is
I've
that?
seen that on a sign somewhere in some
so?
other valley. We are not there. We're also like way above our pay grade on this one. Today our guest John.
Well, welcome everybody
Yeah.
to The Winemakers. I'm John Myers with Bart Hansen, Phil Coturri, Sam Coturri, and Ada Limón, the 24th Poet Laureate of the United States of America. Welcome, and welcome back to Sonoma.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to be with you guys.
I just want to say,
And then we're like, all right,
Yeah.
we got nothing now.
Right.
You
That's
just
exactly
please
right.
save us, Ada. Read something, make us sound smart. We got nothing. We have also the Poet Laureate of Winery 16600, Phil
Right.
Coturri.
Lipo died drunk. Trying to race.
Well, and Phil, you were a poetry major, correct?
What's that?
You were a
Yeah,
poetry
say
major?
that into the microphone again, the Lipo.
Please.
Lipo died drunk, trying to embrace the reflection of the moon in the Yellow River.
In the Yellow River.
And Lipo has always been my go-to poet.
Your
Oh, I love
go-to drunken Chinese poet.
Drunken Chinese poet.
Yeah.
They're only drunk on wine.
Only drunk on wine.
Only.
oh, heroin?
No, there was no heroin. There was opium.
There was opium.
I saw an old ad the other day from Bayer Manufacturing, Bayer Pharmaceuticals.
Bayer, yeah.
Yeah. And it's aspirin, manufacturers of aspirin and heroin. The preferred cough suppressant. It's like, okay, whatever, man.
Definitely, you'll stop coughing.
And
You'll stop coughing.
didn't Bayer buy Monsanto?
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
this is good.
Still,
as heroin.
still delivering.
In the business of getting us
Mm.
sick and selling
Yeah.
us things that
Still-
they'll tell us will
Still
make
getting
us
us sick, yeah.
All right. Well, Sam, I think you said that you wanted to start with asking your dad a couple questions.
Well, I mean, we are in uncharted territory here for the Winemakers podcast with as an esteemed guest as Ada. So I thought maybe we should have a little bit of wine and vineyard context, mostly because with the crazy weather that we've had in California in this past week, a hurricane, tropical storm making landfall, and just sort of capping a crazy weather year. And harvest starting everywhere except for us. I thought we'd do a quick sort of vintage update and talk about where we're at. I walked through Muchas Piedras and Simon's Marsan yesterday, and basically it's all green berries.
Veraison has started, and it's going to be real quick. It's not going to be a prolonged Veraison. Veraison being color change.
Right.
And so our softening of berries as it ripens. This morning, I was watching the news, and I was in Tahoe, and it was news from KCRA in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Today they started the tomato harvest.
Today?
Today
Started?
It started in the Sacramento Valley. That's a month late,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
and we're looking at the same thing with maybe not quite a month, but. A year ago, we everything was verated, everything was in deep color, and as we moved into Labor Day weekend last year, we ended up with a 10-day heat storm that destroyed a lot of fruit. This year, I'm not worried about a heat storm, a traditional Labor Day heat storm, because we'll be ending Veraison probably middle to beginning of the following week. So as we move into Labor Day, we'll be not as ripe as we were a year ago. The atmosphere, the heat this year has been, as I remember it growing up in Sonoma, where we'd have 2 to 3 days of warm weather and the fog would come in,
Mm-hmm.
and even having more, and that's what we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And we never picked. Traditionally always picked Zin around my birthday, which is the 3rd of October, and that's what I'm looking at this year.
Which would be 2 weeks later than we picked it last year.
2 weeks later, so precisely. We're degree days. We're about a third behind we were a year ago, and degree days is the continual hours where it's above I think 58 or 60 degrees,
60 to 85 or something. Right?
The perfect slot.
I appreciate your comment about the fog, because Sam, you and I have been talking about it on here for over a year now about how it is kind of the return of the fog. Like the fog was gone for a number of years from what we remember growing up, right? But it's amazing. Like we're not getting those extreme temperatures yet.
We're not, and there's so much moisture. There's a lot of moisture in the air. Of course, with Hillary getting her revenge, Hillary's revenge upon us. But there's been moisture in the air. Even our heat spike, we've gotten up to 100 degrees a couple of times during this growing season. Most recently, about a week ago. But it doesn't last long, and it's not this incredibly dry heat that we're normally used to. And what I always think what's normal as we turn into September, and we get the offshore winds, and that's around the end of September, beginning of October. To me, that's what really sets our flavors, and we'll see what. I look forward to that this year.
Yeah.
Phil, I know through conversations you've always said that we shouldn't start picking red grapes until October, right? Like after the solstice.
After the solstice.
And all those people that were always in a rush to pick, they're going to be forced to wait this time, aren't they?
They are going to be forced to wait, and there'll be a nice long hang time. There's nothing better than having the fruit be numerically ripe and have the ability to let it hang for 2 more weeks, because so that you get that the sensually white where everything gets soft and the juice starts to flow, and that's really what I look forward to.
We're last night I was in San Francisco, and Tristan, who works in the tasting room, spotted a family of Italian tourists, and Tristan is fluent in Italian and looking for his any attempts to practice, and started talking to them and invited them to the tasting room, and they're just showing up now as we speak. And he, of course, isn't here today. It's his day off. Well played, Tristan, when you listen to this one. It worked out exactly how you planned. Veraison is such an interesting time in the vineyards, and the word Veraison, if you look at the roots of it, it's truth, ver, and it's about the sort of poetic way of looking at it is this is when the grapes sort of start to take their true form. And one of the reasons that I was so excited to sit down and talk to you, Ada, is with the wines that we make and the wines that Bart makes and the wines that Jeff Baker has made his whole career are about capturing a sense of place and extracting the truth of the vintage and the vineyard and putting it in the bottle. And as far as art forms go, poetry seems like sort of the perfect vehicle for that, of capturing a sense of place, especially the poems based in nature, the Gary Snyder that my dad studied in college and through life, and it seems like the work that you do has I sent around State Bird to the podcast crew when I told them that we'd gotten you for our little humble show here, and it's just a poem to me that was drenched in terroir, drenched in a sense of place. So start this conversation. We'll kind of talk about your background and history and trajectory and Sonoma roots, but talk about capturing a sense of place in with words and poetry, and if that's something that you even think about as you're sitting down with pen and paper.
Yeah, I love that question, and actually do think there's a lot of similarities between winemaking, grape growing, and poetry. And I think a lot of it is about that. It's about how you represent a place and how you can hold on to that place. I always think that sometimes poetry, it's not always about joy, right? I mean, there's a lot of sad poems out there and a lot of intense poems that deal with crisis and trauma. But at the same time, there are times where you can kind of distill a moment, a place, or something you've experienced and pin it to the page. And when you can actually feel like it's sort of still living and then return to it, it feels like you can actually step into that room again or step into that place again. And it feels like a type of resurrection in some ways. And so I feel like when a poem to me is complete, it does feel like it's still living. It doesn't feel like it's necessarily done or finished or ended, but it just feels like it is itself, right? It is a complete room. And at some point you can enter it at any moment. Right. And I feel that's actually very similar to like when you do open, a bottle of wonderful wine or, something from here, at least for me, being born and raised in this valley, when I'm homesick, I know exactly what to do, right? I know exactly what to do. And I go get in my basement a bottle of Jeff's wine, and I am home again. And I feel that same way with poetry. I do feel like it can bring you back to those places. And whether it's a physical place or a spiritual place, it can ground you in that. And that's really important to me. And for a long time, when I lived in New York, I was born and raised in the Valley. I lived in New York for almost 12 years, came back to the Valley with intention of staying. And then my partner, who I was in love with, became my husband, and he moved to Kentucky to start his business, which is a joke, is that I've gone from the wine country to bourbon country.
It's all about
distilled spirits.
Yeah. I have to,
good barrels.
wherever I go, it has to have a significant thing,
Right.
I guess, Porto will be next.
All mind altering experiences.
But I do think that that having that experience and like writing about places when I'm not there or writing about places when I am there feels like a way of either memorializing the place or the moment or reminding myself of that place when I'm deeply homesick. So that's really important to me in my process.
And so when you're maybe I should rethink this question. When you're in a place,
fire away.
When
You've already started it. It's too late.
When you're in a place and you're inspired to write something down, is it usually, is that done from the spirit of that place, or does the beginning of it allow you to work? Can you talk about the process a little bit, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like if you come into a place and you feel like you want to capture the essence of that, do you write it down? Do you, however you capture it, or do you write notes and come back to it? And is that part of the process? Yeah,
I think that's a great question. I think it differs. Each poem is kind of different. Sometimes I can be in the place and I'm moved to record exactly what's happening. And I'm thinking this, and then I think, oh, this is just note taking. I get home, I go, no, that actually was a complete poem. Most of the time it's note taking. Most of the time it's remembering certain lines, remembering images, writing down, and then going back when I have something more time, more contemplative, more space between the event itself and the making. Right. And then that makes a poem. But it happens both ways. If I can write a complete poem in actual one sitting in a moment, that's, a day I should play the lottery, I think. So that doesn't often happen. A lot of times it's more working, crafting, making, revising, and then revising and revising again and reading it out loud as many times as I can get it to actually get it to complete. But at the same time, there are times when, I'm very moved either by a memory. Like I'll be in a place, like maybe I'm sitting in Kentucky and I'm very moved by a memory from here in the Valley, or vice versa. Right. And so I think all poets will tell you that time doesn't exist for them. And so I feel like all of those, like it's just a continuum. And so when I'm working in that kind of memory, all the places are with me.
Right. I think part of where I was going with this is I think about like artists and the difference between an artist that, goes to a place, maybe does a sketch, takes a photograph of it, and then goes and paints the picture, as opposed to plein air, where you're there and you just immersed and you finish it. And I'm just, those things always I wonder about. So
I love that. And the answer is sort of both ways. Yeah.
And as you described that, you were describing what happens when you taste a vintage wine. You open up an old bottle, and you're capturing that moment in time, as you do when you write a poem. That there's a story when that bottle's opened, and as you taste it, you remember the vintage. You remember what happens with the people that you're drinking that wine with. Maybe 10 years later, when you open that same wine, maybe the different vintage, but the same winemaker, or however they wanted to approach it. And it's never perfect. Yeah. And time creates perfection, or creates illusions of perfection, or the alcohol creates illusions of perfection. And that's the beauty of the similarities of capturing wine and capturing poetry. Yeah. Because they're constantly, the poem constantly changes. Yeah. And the flavor is constantly and change.
So true, because I think it's also about not only about what is there on the page or there in the bottle, but also what you bring to it. Right? Like we always say that there's because poetry is written in a lineated way, and it might have stanzas or caesuras or line breaks or whatever around it, there's space around it. And that's the space for the reader. That's the space for another person to enter. And you bring whatever baggage of the day, whatever triumph of the day, to the poem. And you do that with wine too, right? You bring yourself, whether it's chaotic and messy, or whether it's calm and collected, or whatever you're going through, you bring yourself to that. And that changes the experience and will change the memory of that.
Sam shared.
Enhances that.
Yeah, often enhances it.
Yeah.
Ada, Sam shared a poem with us called State Bird. Yeah. And you talk about terroir in a poem. It's beautiful.
I do.
And great.
Because
it's a beautiful thing. And I love the fact you even get into where you live in it. I mean, your home. It's fascinating. So
I was so proud of Sam for like linking terroir to it.
I mean,
when you said it, I immediately got it.
I'd had this idea that terroir could come through in a poem, and that was like, how I could justify to myself trying to get the U.S. Poet Laureate to come on our wine podcast. And then I found that. It didn't take a whole lot of Googling Ada Limón to find that one. I'm not like, it wasn't studying hard.
You use the internet?
I used the internet to make to look smart in front of my friends. And but that one was just like, it leapt out of my phone screen as just like drenched in being in Kentucky and what that felt like, and whether or not that's where you wanted to be, you were finding the joy there. Yeah. It's pretty special.
Oh,
piece, and I can't wait to hear it because again, reading it off your iPhone, it leaves a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, I would love to read it, and it's funny because there's a poem in my first book that kind of I think that this one maybe responds to. That's sort of a Sonoma bird poem, and so I think this would be a good Kentucky bird poem first. And I'll start this by saying that the poem begins with. I was really hoping in 2010, I moved all of my things out of New York into my place on Moon Mountain, and was really like, this is going to be, I'm so excited. This is my home again. And then I ended up in Kentucky, and I love my beautiful, wonderful, kind husband. And I do love Kentucky, but it took me a while to surrender to it, if you will. State Bird. Confession. I did not want to live here. Not among the goldenrod, wild onions, or the drop seed, not waist high in the barrel-aged brown corn water, not with the $1 million racehorses, nor the tightly wound round hay bales, not even in the old tobacco way station we live in, with its heavy metal safe doors that frame our bricked bedroom like the mouth of a strange beast yawning to suck us in each night like air. I denied it, this new land. But love, I'll concede this. Whatever state you are, I'll be that state's bird. The loud, obvious blur of song people point to when they wonder where it is you've gone.
Beautiful.
Way better heard than read off my iPhone. I'll say that. The thing that strikes me about it, especially the sort of the first half or 2/3, is when I hear it, I'm smelling all of those things. Smelling the goldenrod and the sort of the grasslands, the bourbon, the hay, the horses, the tobacco, just like the richness of the aroma in there, just like
Yeah, and Kentucky really is full of smells and senses. And I think when I struggled with sort of the state, figuring out who I was, being a California girl, I had this moment of like, oh, how do you get to know a place? How do you belong, or figure out how you belong in a place? And it's to get to know the plants and the animals, right? And that's how you do it. Right. And I suddenly was like, oh, right. And once I started sort of naming, like, oh, I didn't know that's a sweet gum tree. I didn't know that this was I suddenly could relax in the place and feel like I was more identified with the land. And then I felt like I could belong there. And I think that was a big part of it. So, but it's a deeply rich smelling place. It's very fertile. It's very green. And I always laugh that the air smells like horses, like it literally does smell like
sweat.
Horses. Yeah, it really does.
Especially in the summertime, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you were talking about the development of a poem, and the most important part of a poem is to hear it.
Yeah.
And you could read it, but reading it to yourself, but reading it out loud to get part of the dance of the words on the page, and the breath that you have presenting it makes things come alive again. It's like giving air to opening a bottle of wine.
It is exactly that.
Because it's the breath. The breath is what controls how the words that we put on a page. Yeah. Breath is what controls what we do in the vineyard, and breath is what we do when we open a bottle of wine. Yeah. So you let it breathe, right? And then get the aromas.
Yeah. And you have to feel it in the body.
Yeah, you do.
Right? Like you have to.
You have to.
Yeah, it's not. I think a lot of people think that writing poems is an intellectual activity, but it really is a whole body activity. And it has to be in the bloodstream, like Lorca talks about duende, like it has to actually be roused up through the blood.
Through the spirits.
And you have to have a clear mind and probably allow yourself to actually connect with it, right? As to actually pay attention and not be distracted by outside pressures.
Yeah. Although I will say there's sometimes when people will say, oh, you were reading that poem and I went someplace else and I was in this, other place. And I think that's okay too. You might not have stayed with me through the whole poem, but it made you have this feeling or memory of your own, whether it was your own family or your own experience or, and that to me also is a beautiful thing, right? I mean, the nice thing about poetry is there's no right answer. There's no one way to experience it. And so if you do get distracted and go down, this other sort of place, that's beautiful too. I love that.
It's interesting how poetry seems to be you observing life, where most people just kind of roll right through it without even looking. They old stop and smell the roses, but I mean, you actually stop and kind of listen to the roses and identify that, what it's like to be with the roses. And that's cool, because you remind everybody else that there's more to life than just getting up, going to work, coming home, crashing, doing it again until you pass. Yeah. That's it. So many people live their lives like that, and they don't take a chance to enjoy life. I think that's one of the jobs of a poet. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think that, a lot of poets will tell you, like, why do you write? Why do you spend time doing this? And it's like, I think a very simple and maybe morbid answer, but it's because we're going to die. And I think that, is why, and so I don't want to miss anything. And I think that it's very easy to almost live as if every day will keep coming. And when you live that way, you miss things because you're just thinking about the next day or the next thing or the next item on the list that needs to be checked off. And then when you think, okay, wait, maybe today's it, maybe tomorrow's it, maybe, then you start to pay attention in a different way. And I think poets really have a sense of their mortality built in a way that I don't necessarily think is depressing, but I do think it makes it more technicolor, the world, if you will.
Do you have a favorite thing to write about?
Oh, it's definitely nature. Definitely nature. Yeah. I mean, because I'm amazed by it. It's, I'm sometimes, find my own brain a troubled place to be. And and nature is the place where if I'm observing something or looking around, even where we are right now, I'm seeing so many things that I'm loving to look at. And I feel this that's just, it always brings me back to myself. And I think that I can forget that I'm animal, that I'm a human animal.
That's right.
And nature reminds me that I'm an animal, and that means I belong to this planet.
Is Kentucky as much of a nature bubble as I think Sonoma is? I mean, I've lived in New York City and Chicago, so I've lived in cement, basically.
Yeah.
Coming out here is such a new trip for me because it's fascinating. It's all nature, and you can go look in any direction and see beauty in nature. Yeah. Is Lexington and Kentucky like that?
Kentucky is very much like that. It's a different kind of nature. It's of course, it's more pasture land because it's all mostly horses. Wherever you look, it's the animal you will see is horses, whether they're thoroughbreds or standardbreds or quarter horses. And they're everywhere. But in terms of its natural raw beauty, the Red River Gorge, all of those slate and limestone structures, natural bridges that are just incredible that you can walk across, and a lot of people come out and do rock climbing. It's actually really quite beautiful. A lot of lakes and rivers. And again, I didn't know that. In fact, I think I was surprised. You hear the word Kentucky, you don't know. You think bourbon and horses, I guess, and maybe basketball. But
which have a certain draw. All three of those things.
Yeah. But I didn't know about the natural beauty. But it really is really quite beautiful.
In lots of ways, being a third generation Californian, Sam's fourth, and our grandkids fifth. When you live in California, you're spoiled. Yeah. Because of our beautiful natural environment that we live in. Yeah. But there is so much beauty whenever you do go have the ability to see it. And I think of William Carlos Williams, who grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, and captures in nature in such a beautiful way that from a red wheelbarrow, and just how if a poem makes you stop, as you say, it for a moment and leave your body, and be put in that, so you could see something through somebody else's eyes. It's worked. Yeah. And the poet's responsibility is to transport you to that point. Yeah. And it's from California to Kentucky, or from California to go into the desert of Nevada, or the desert of New York City. Yeah. And there's and as I've always went with poetry and nature and being in the vineyards as all my life, so to speak. Just to watch the prenuptials of hawks, or the prenuptials of somebody going into a dance contest. You're able to draw those parallels, and that's the beauty of poetry. And with wine, it gives you the freedom to draw those parallels lots of times.
I agree. I think being raised here, And I don't know how, I mean, everyone has their own upbringing, but I was raised in this valley and, Glen Ellen and Sonoma. And I think that, I went to Dunbar School, it's just gorgeous. It's just surrounded by beauty. The amount of oak trees that are around it, all of these, we would just have, I remember sitting, my first grade teacher, Mr. Mike, who I just saw the other day, that we would go out into the fields and our assignment was to name and identify what was around us, just sit in one place and be able to name and identify these things. And, that was in first grade. Yeah. And I do think there's not only the connection of the beauty that we see, but also that I think the community here is very much about protecting and preserving that witnessing of that beauty, which I think not always the case.
Preserving it is always that dichotomy that we got to live with, because it is such a beautiful place. People want to be here.
Yeah.
And when you have people are a pain in the butt, because
yeah.
How do you control aesthetics?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe everybody should be required to read a certain amount of poetry before they're allowed to live in Sonoma.
Oh, I think that's absolutely a great idea.
But then you end up like Ezra Pound and become a fascist.
Yeah, that's true.
I was going to say, and make them pass a test.
Yeah. They have to listen to a certain amount of poetry before they can read it all they want. They have to listen to it.
Listen to it.
Well, when we were kids, we were quote unquote forced to read poetry, of course, in school. And it always seemed a little bit complicated, a little too deep for most of us. I'll include myself. But you draw people into it. It seems it's not simplistic. It's just open. It's open. It's drawing me in. What's the nature of that? How do you do that?
Yeah. Oh, well, I appreciate that compliment. I mean, it is something I like to do. I mean, I think oftentimes I am writing poems for myself and my own experience, or for my friends or family, or beloveds. But I think that there's I do think that I like poetry that connects. And I like there to be something, because I think you can write a poem that's just for yourself, and that's beautiful. But I don't necessarily think then you should be upset that no one reads it. I think that if you want to connect, you should write poetry that connects. And that was important to me, especially I think that I got my MFA at NYU, and I think there was a moment when I graduated where everyone was writing poetry that was very intellectual, and it felt like every poem was an exercise in proving how smart you were. And I could do that. But I didn't like the poems that came out of it. And I didn't want to obfuscate a meaning or truth. And I wanted poems that I liked. I wanted poems I could give to my stepdad, and who doesn't have a college degree. And I wanted to be able to give poems to people who weren't poets. And I realized that getting out of the MFA, which I had a wonderful experience and actually really appreciate my degree, but I do think that we were just writing for each other, and poets sometimes have that trouble where it gets insular, where poetry is just written for other poets, and the cycle continues. And I didn't want that. I wanted to write poems for everyone.
You've been doing an awful lot of press lately, with being nominated. This is your second time, correct, as Poet Laureate?
Yeah, my first term just ended, and my second 2-year term technically starts in September. So, and then
that's so cool.
Thank you.
Really is.
And then I'll serve until April 2025.
So
and then I will nap. Then you'll just see me around town napping.
On your bench.
On my bench. I will be napping on my bench.
So you've been doing a lot of interviews lately. What are a couple of the key points that you'd like to get out there? Some of the key messages that haven't been asked lately.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that people talk about a lot is, how do we understand poetry, or how, what makes a poem good, or maybe I don't understand it. What's wrong with me? That kind of, there's a lot of frustration or anxiety around poems because they're afraid that they are not understanding it. And I always think it's much more like music. Like if you're not going to listen to, a Neil Young song and be like, well, I don't understand absolutely everything he's saying, so I'm not going to like it. Or that means it's not for me. There's you can appreciate parts of a poem. You can say, I don't know what this means, but I like it. Or there's something in it that moves me. And I think that a mistake that we make is thinking that it's some kind of, if you're not getting X, Y, and Z meaning, then you don't understand poetry.
Why is that? Why do people have that kind of
I think it has to do with maybe the way people were taught poetry, that it was supposed to be something you explicated and, you took notes and you were like, I understood that this means this. And, and if you didn't get that, you failed the test. And, poetry is not at all about test. It really isn't. It's about saving your soul. And so I think that you can just ease into it and listen to it with your whole body without any kind of expectations of solving it.
So, I mean, don't you think that conversation helps bring that out as opposed to, as you say, a test, like for young people?
Yeah.
Like, being able to sit around and discuss it and try to get what people's thoughts are would be the best way to kind of share that and learn it, it would seem like. Yeah.
I think it's just, reading and discussing it, feel like, oh, what did you like about this? Right. What do you remember about this? What's it doing? Those kind of just questions, just questions.
Right.
But there's no like, oh, that's not there. Or this, just, oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then I think especially, kids are so creative that if they can write their own poems, they start to see, oh, this is how you might make something.
Right. Now
Now I'm making this. Now I have something to compare it to, being able to engage in it, that everyone can be a poet.
Yeah.
Everyone can make a poem.
Can you talk a little bit about what your responsibilities are with this position?
As the U.S. Poet Laureate?
I mean, what is that?
You have a business card that says U.S. Poet.
Does it have a government stamp on it?
Everybody wants a title, so
yeah.
that's right.
I don't have a business card. I should have brought you bookmarks. I do have bookmarks. I'll make sure you get some. So I do. I'm appointed by the Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden. And so technically I do work for the library and I do work for Congress. And so
you work for Congress, so you get to go tell
thank God somebody works in Congress.
Seriously, a voice of reason.
Voice of reason.
And so because of that, the role is also something that should be nonpartisan, bipartisan in some ways. But the main mission that Dr. Carla Hayden sort of gave me was to elevate and expand the audience for poetry, to give voice to poetry. And so I am creating a national poetry project that will be announced on September 6th. Okay.
Breaking news here on the Winemakers podcast.
It's breaking news here. Wow. And I can't go into it in too much detail, but I can say it is going to be about poetry and the natural world.
So you have something in common with Chuck Berry because he wrote Johnny Be Good. And of course that was launched into space with, what was it, Voyager?
Voyager, yeah.
Yeah.
On the Golden Record, yeah.
Yeah, so some, whoever finds it can understand that he was a rocker out of St. Louis. Yeah. So your work is going to be launched into space coming up. Can you tell us about how you got with NASA and what it's all about?
Yeah.
And I just want to say that I brought a bottle with a cork, so we're all going to put our message in it, and you'll take it to the spaceship. You'll get it on the spaceship, right?
I love it. We will.
It's a reusable bottle.
Yeah, we'll make sure NASA sees that. Yeah, it was a really a wild. I mean, you can't imagine. It's sort of the wildest invitation you can receive. And I was just telling Sam earlier that there was a moment where I had turned down a large request from an organization, and I had a lot of conflicting ideas and thoughts about it. And so I wasn't sure. And so I finally just said, you know what, I'm not going to write this poem for you guys. And then about a week later, I got an email from NASA saying, well, would you be interested in writing a poem for the spacecraft, the Europa Clipper, which will go to the second moon of Jupiter, which is an icy moon that they believe has all the ingredients for life, as they say.
Well, if you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, of course it does.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they gave me some stipulations. They said that they wanted it to be read at the 4th grade level. It could only be so many words, as you can imagine. I couldn't do Walt Whitman.
Yeah.
They couldn't create a second spacecraft just to carry the rest of the poem.
Right. So it had to be condensed.
Yeah.
The printed volume.
Yeah. And they wanted, they wanted it to include water and the element of water. And of course, when I think about what connects us and why this mission is so important is because of water. And of course, as Californians, we know, water is, we think about water all the time.
Yeah.
And so I remember as we were having this Zoom call with the scientists and the mission folks at the Clipper, I wrote in my journal during that first meeting, we too are made of water. And that became a line that was in the finished poem.
Can you read the poem for us?
Do we need to find it on the internet?
Do we have find it on the internet real quick? And so fabulous.
Yeah, I would love to read the
Well, it's a
poem.
little bit different, a little more elevated than a bench outside of Reader Books, but that's cool too. It's very
elevated in the
said,
true sense.
as Ada,
You got to watch every word you said has many meanings now.
it is the first monument on the Sonoma Plaza to a woman.
Correct.
Even though it's we won't split hairs and it's
Yeah.
half a block
off the plaza.
But the heart of the plaza is Reader's Books anyway. So we'll give Andy and our dearly departed Lola their due on that one. But,
Yes,
All
definitely.
right, everybody.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Ada Limón.
Okay, this is the poem for the Europa Clipper, and it's interesting. I actually wrote this poem in Maui at W.S. Merwin's home in the town called
Haiku, yeah.
In praise of mystery, a poem for Europa. Arching under the night sky, inky with black expansiveness, we point to the planets we know. We pin quick wishes on stars. From Earth, we read the sky as if it is an unerring book of the universe, expert and evident. Still, there are mysteries below our sky. The whale song, the songbird singing its call in the bough of a wind-shaken tree. We are creatures of constant awe, curious at beauty, at leaf and blossom, at grief and pleasure, sun and shadow. And it is not darkness that unites us, not the cold distance of space, but the offering of water. Each drop of rain, each rivulet, each pulse, each vein. O second moon, we too are made of water, of vast and beckoning seas. We too are made of wonders, of great and ordinary loves, of small, invisible worlds, of a need to call out through the dark.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's a stunning poem.
Thank you.
And you're going to read this at the launch of the Europa Clipper, which is a cool name for a ship, just like a Millennium Falcon, which I want a Millennium Falcon. I definitely do.
And now we want a Europa Clipper too.
Yeah, Europa Clipper, yeah.
I actually have the head of the NASA's JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, gave me a model of the Clipper,
Really?
and it's in my office in at the Library of Congress in DC in the Jefferson Building. I have my own office there, and so it's sitting there, and it's the most beautiful model. It's so gorgeous.
Wow, a Clipper ship.
Yeah.
I have to imagine you have pinch me moments all the time in this chapter stanza of your trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about what it's like to be, a little girl who grew up in Sonoma,
Yeah.
and now, getting emails from NASA,
Yeah.
and writing poems that are gonna fly
Yeah.
into space. Like that's
Yeah.
just got to be the most surreal, but also like, I mean, in your wildest dreams, could you have ever thought this would be
Yeah.
the trajectory of your rocket ship?
No. 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 I mean, I think that one of the things that's sort of beautiful about growing up in this valley is there are a lot of dreamers, and there's a lot of space for dreams that people, you want to be a dancer. Okay, we can figure that out. I was laughing that like, you want to be a dancer or, an actor or join the circus. And like, I actually know 3 people who have literally become an actor, become a dancer, and have joined the circus who have come from Sonoma. You know what I mean? So I do feel like it is a place of possibilities, but I knew I wanted to do something creative, but I didn't know what it was. And I thought it was going to be performing, but actually most of my joy, and I think that we all have different ways of being in the world, but for me, I like to perform, but my favorite thing in the world is just making the poem, or just being alone and making the poem. And it feels like that's where I'm most free, like absolutely most free myself. And so I think having that as sort of the core engine of my life has always sort of guided me in different ways. But having imagined this, no. I mean, I'm lucky I am from a place where I worked at Reader's Books. So I saw people who were poets. I know a lot of little kids who grew up not knowing that being a poet is even a possibility. I was the person that poured water for Carolyn Kaiser and poured water for Phil Levine when he read, and Sharon Olds, and, and got their mic set up and at Reader's Books. So I knew that was something. And so that was a gift. But in terms of where this has ended up and where it's going, I have no idea. And every day something happens that delights me and surprises me. And I keep thinking that the way I keep staying grounded is just remembering that I just want to make things that matter. And I keep wanting to make things that I really believe in. And if I keep doing that, then hopefully all the rest that follows will be of good intention and goodwill.
It's quite a door you've opened, isn't it? I mean, a whole new world out there.
Yeah.
Where were you on Maui, and what were you doing?
I was on the North Shore. It's a town called Haiku. It's the home of W.S. Merwin. That's now the Merwin Conservancy. Merwin was the poet, also a poet laureate, and a marvelous, marvelous poet, really beautiful poet of the natural world. And so they now invite people to come and stay for 2 weeks or a month and write poems. And he created single-handedly, really, a palm forest, which has become a forest of palms from all over the world. They're not all native, but so many palms are threatened because they require a specific kind of terroir to survive. And so he just had people who thought, oh, this forest is being threatened. I'm going to send you the seed of these palms. And so he has planted this incredible palm forest, and his house is like a tree house situated in this palm forest. And when he passed away, it became the conservancy that's there for other writers to come and write.
And that's where you were staying when you wrote this?
Yeah.
Around a lot of water.
Yeah.
And that, actually, Ram Dass lived and died in outside of Haiku.
Yeah.
Richard Albert.
It's a magical place. It truly is. I'm so sorry
Truly.
of what happened. I mean, it's beyond words.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm actually been working with the Conservancy now. We've just been starting conversations about what we can do with poetry to help.
Well, they did the same thing here after the fires, and even Sam was involved.
Right.
Yeah.
We did a series of poems.
And what was the book called that you were in?
We have a copy of it inside.
Somewhere we have
It's
a
called. We have a copy from the.
We have a copy inside. Yes.
Yeah, and it was done via the
Museum of
Museum.
Art. Yes, Sonoma Valley.
Yeah, I contribute a poem to that. Yeah.
Right.
Fantastic. I didn't know that.
I've been published alongside U.S. Poet Laureate.
Sam.
I'm going to retire after this.
Well, it was just so interesting to hear everybody's take on the fire. And there were all sorts of different ones. I recorded some podcasts with the museum and had poets come over and read them and record.
Yeah.
And it was just fascinating learning about all these people and they're just human beings. They don't have a particular aptitude for one thing or another. But yeah,
Clearly.
I mean,
But see, that's.
but you don't have to
but
be.
poetry, you have an aptitude towards it.
Yeah.
Because poetry is made from the breath of your life.
Yeah.
And I don't, if you're, Gary Snyder talks about it in Rip Rap, take these words as stones placed down. And the work and the life that you do, everybody creates poetry.
Yeah.
And once they realize that some of the poetry rhymes, but there was structure that we had to break out of, that some poet broke out of at some point. But but everybody has that ability to experience the passion, and the frustration of expression.
Yeah.
And if they're able and just allowed to do it, and that's where poetry in the schools free kids up, so you can think outside the box. So you're given this when we're taught literature, you're given all these rules. But when you go outside the box, you break the rules, you question authority, and you're able to express yourself. And everybody, being a famous poet is almost an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But being a poet is how I think is the way you choose to live your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And expression.
Did you have to read Carl Sandburg in high school and junior high?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
think I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. I think I shall never hear a poem as lovely as beer. And that was by Ralph Alfred E. Newman. The second one.
Well, the first time I really got into poetry, I think was probably Bob Dylan, just listening to his lyrics because they were poetry, and Marty Ballin from the Airplane writing poetry and putting it to music, folk rock music.
Robert Hunter.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell.
Have you ever had any of your lyrics put to music?
Yes, I have. And it's been really wonderful. Actually, there was a poem I wrote in my book, The Carrying, called Notes on the Below, which is a poem for Mammoth Cave, which is one of the longest caves in the United States, longest caves in the world, I believe. And it's, the Louisville Orchestra did a whole rendition of that poem. And Yo-Yo Ma played, and they played in Mammoth Cave.
Nice. Really?
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Big guy for that one.
We just got tickets to Sheku Mason in the city, and they sold out in 4 minutes. And the first time I heard him was, my wife was watching the royal wedding, and I thought, well, this cat's good. And it turns out like his whole family is as good as he is.
Yeah.
And it's just spectacular. I'm not sure how that runs in genetics or just psychology or what, but amazing.
Yeah.
And love Yo-Yo Ma.
Mm-hmm.
Yo-Yo Mama.
Yeah.
Well, I know I asked you to bring some things to read. So if you have a couple, although I'm totally curious about the California State Bird version.
Yeah, I feel like I have to find that right now that we've mentioned it. It's like mentioning the gun in the first act, right? We have to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Ada flips through and finds that poem. Let's some quick shout outs and reminders. There are still Catherine Russell tickets available, September 17th. And also now, if you go to the Girl in the Fig Instagram account or just any of their social media or website, the dinner the night before, the Grenache night dinner, undisclosed location, secret John Toolsey dinner, tickets are available for that.
Yep.
So we're shaping up for an epic Grenache Day weekend in Sonoma.
And should you miss Catherine Russell this time around, she's Tuesday the 19th. Yeah, at Freight and Salvage.
At Freight and Salvage. Yeah, the key with getting Catherine Russell and her band here was they wanted to sort of fill out their schedule. So they have a little like mini Northern California tour starting with our show, and then I think there's the Freight and Salvage show in Sacramento. Yeah. Maybe at the end of the week, Green Music Center in Rohnert Park, and then finishing at the Monterey Jazz Festival. So you could go on mini tour with Catherine Russell and follow her all around Northern California if you want.
I might have to fly back for that.
Be a Russell head.
Be a Russell head. It's we'll put you on the list. Another perk of being U.S. Poet Laureate is you can come to our show for free.
And you don't
as long as you read a poem to open it up.
Maybe just a rocket ship flyover if we can get one. Talk to somebody at NASA.
Just that one. Yeah, the flyby.
That's all we ask.
NASA flyby.
And drop the bottle.
Right.
Well, I want a model of the Clipper.
I know,
mean, it's cool. I'm looking at it online here, and it's just fantastic.
It's incredible.
I'd
I'll
love
show
to-
you a picture of the actual model they gave me. It's really
That's
amazing.
cool.
Better get busy, John.
Yeah.
I found this poem. This is the poem that I think is sort of a sister poem
Right,
to
part
State
one.
Bird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is it's definitely a Sonoma poem. Overjoyed. What's the drunk waxwing supposed to do when all day's been an orgy of red buds on the winery's archway off Garricky Road, and it's too far to make it home, too long to fly, even as the sober crow goes? What's the point of passion when the pyracantha berries keep the blood turn towards obsess? Don't you know those birds are going to toss themselves to the streets for some minor song of happiness? And who can blame them? This life is hard. And let me be the first to admit, when I come across some jewel of pleasure, I too want to squeeze that thing until even its seedy heart evaporates like ethanol. Want to throw my bird bones into the brush fire until half blind, all I can hear is a sound of wings in the relentlessly delighted air.
Well, beautiful.
If that's not that's going to be the theme of the harvest. I'm going to print it out and post it on the winery wall.
Overjoyed.
Yeah, overjoyed.
Okay, so being from Iowa originally, I know the goldfinch is the state bird.
Mhm.
The state bird here is the condor.
No, the
No.
quail.
Quail.
California
Okay.
quail.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Did a condor tell you that?
As he was picking you up.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Oh, the poor condor.
The poor condor. Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh.
Exceeded all expectations.
I mean, and we actually asked a couple good questions.
I know we did. pretty
No,
good,
you
Mark.
guys,
I'm
this
proud.
was great.
Not bad for a couple of Sonoma County boys.
Well,
It's amazing.
I've been. I have to tell this story about Sam, and oh boy, and growing up here in
Bright
Sonoma.
red as a
But there was
cardinal.
at one point I went in to say goodnight to him as a kid, and he was reading words, and he was studying words, and I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well," he had a list of words, and he was studying the roots of words, and to understand. He said, "Well, I want to understand words. So I have to go back to the roots, and which I thought for a kid. I mean, I was studying words. I was studying to be a poet, but I never sat down and memorized the roots.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, you have to pull it up by the roots to let the dirt dangle from it. And the roots is where we get it's where our life is, and the have the ability to express a love for words like that. I think explains a lot how Sam talks all the time.
Yeah.
but
I have a podcast.
yeah, that's why he has a podcast. But it's to turn a kid on to the root of a word
Yeah.
and the power of a word is where where poetry is. Just a single word expresses so much power when stated properly or stated improperly. And there is no properness. And that's that's the beauty of poetry.
Yeah.
Phil, I hear a poem coming on about roots bringing life and giving life. Because without roots, you don't have life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Without roots,
Everything
you don't go far.
grows.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got my roots, and it's
We all express our
fascinating.
roots.
Mhm.
And as I goes back to Tennessee, the roots are expressed.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
Right.
Same
Well,
Kentucky.
it's-
Bourbon, not Tennessee
Well,
whiskey.
I just
You're a Maker's Mark guy. You should know.
Yeah, no, it has been a while since
Yeah.
I've had any spirits other than tequila.
The one.
So what's next, Ada? What's on the list to
So I'll
happen
launch the National Poetry Project. The announcement will come out on September 6th. And then I'll basically start to tour again, starting on September 20. I think my first event is September 21st. And
When's the launch?
The launch of the Europa Clipper will actually be in October 2024.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're still.
And you're going to go there and,
I am.
and read the poem?
I'm going to read the poem at the launch. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about the poem that was read at Biden's inauguration?
Amanda Gorman.
Oh, by
Amanda
Amanda
Gorman.
Gorman. Yeah, the inaugural poet. Yeah.
Pretty fantastic.
Oh yeah,
wasn't it?
she's wonderful.
You know
Wonderful
her
poet.
yet?
Yeah, no, we've never met. But I know we have mutual friends. Yeah.
So what's the future hold for Ada?
You know, I think I'm very excited about the next 2 years of service, and I feel like one thing that I've noted from the first year is that I definitely need to take a little more time off, which is what I'm doing here, which is so wonderful. You know, I usually get to kind of come in and fly out, but I have a whole nother week here, which I never get. So I'm really building in more breaks because I do think, like anybody, I'm a human in a body, and the body gets tired even if the mind does not, or the mind gets tired and your body keeps going. And either way, that is disharmony. So I'm going to be, it's definitely a lot of readings. It's a very busy fall. And then when the project launches, I will be touring national parks. Those will be announced soon. And also a sort of secret thing that I can't tell you about, but we'll tell you about soon.
Excellent.
Yeah. So
You're-
lots
you're-
of
you're
Intrigue.
really
Intrigue.
lots
The
of fun
press release.
things. Yeah.
The press release to
Yeah, we'll
We will.
announce. We'll make sure.
yeah.
We'll give a shout out. Folks who are following along at home, follow you on Instagram. What are some of the best ways to
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
track of what's going on?
My public account. Yeah, my public account on Instagram. I just admitted I have a private account.
Right.
No, it's
You don't get that one, folks.
It's Ada Limón Writer, and then on Twitter it's at Ada Limón. I've yet to join any of the new things, but maybe I will. And
Threads,
then,
Blue Sky.
yeah, exactly. And then my website is just adalimon.com, and it's ADALIMON.
And what would you like to leave
Yes.
our audiences with?
Well, hopefully,
Oh.
one last reading, right?
That
Yeah.
that's what I was hoping.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? I will
That's
close
about
with this
as
poem.
big a send off as I can create there, Sam. So
I think that it's very easy sometimes to, as we know, the news gets really intense for all of us. And I'm traveling all over, so I'm seeing the different sort of communities that are impacted and affected by whatever is happening in the world, whether it's, climate crisis or, different kind of trauma that people are going through. And it's very easy to become apocalyptic. And I think I'd really try not to catastrophize in my own thinking. And so the poem that I'm going to read, I think of it as an apocalyptic love poem, because what's the alternate or the opposite of that kind of catastrophizing? And I think the answer is love. And so the last line of this poem is the poem that is on the bench that has been dedicated to me here in Sonoma. The conditional. Say tomorrow doesn't come. Say the moon becomes an icy pit. Say the sweet gum tree is petrified. Say the sun's a foul black tire fire. Say the owl's eyes are pinpricks. Say the raccoon's a hot tar stain. Say the shirt's plastic ditch litter. Say the kitchen's a cow's corpse. Say we never get to see it. Bright future, stuck like a bum star, never coming close, never dazzling. Say we never meet her, never him. Say we spend our last moments staring at each other, hands knotted together, clutching the dog, watching the sky burn. Say it doesn't matter. Say that would be enough. Say you'd still want this, us, alive, right here, feeling lucky.
Thank you so very much. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for being on the show. This has been such a pleasure. Yeah? Really,
Thank you.
truly.
Thank you for having me.
This
Excellent.
goes down as a early favorite for an all-time great.
Yeah, I think we got to pull a couple of these out and
Yeah.
post them. And,
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
some nice readings. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any shout outs, Phil? What are you up to this afternoon? You heading in the fields?
Actually, there's a man that is showing up here, that in 2001, he did an internship. He lived in our that's where he bought the bungalow.
Yeah.
He's from Israel. He was so he farmed with me for, I think it was a 6-month period, and he went back and got his doctorate. And I haven't seen him. I saw him once passing, but he's bringing his family by in about an hour. So it's going to be interesting to see him.
Cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
Bart?
Father of Dane,
Wow.
no, just, starting to kind of think about harvest, trying to spend a lot of time out in the vineyards so I can get caught up because I'm a little late getting out there. But fortunately,
Well,
the vineyards,
the grapes waited for you.
wait also. Yeah. So, and I'll give one shout out. The Sonoma Valley Vintage Festival is coming up August 29th and September 1st, or is it August
No.
30th and September
August.
1st?
No, it's like
29th.
September 24th or something. I think in the last year, aren't you?
No, it's
Look on the website,
Look on the
SonomaValleyWine.com.
tickets.
Check it out. It's going to be
tickets are
good.
for sale.
It'll be a blast.
And on Sonoma Spiel podcast, Bart was just a guest talking, mainly focusing on the Vintage Fest,
Yeah.
plus you. Yeah, right?
Yep.
So that should be interesting with Timothy Zahn, isn't it? Last name? What?
Yeah.
So, Sam, what's going on?
September 17th. That's all that's on my mind. Buy tickets. Let's sell this thing out before this show goes live.
Good man.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Ada, what a pleasure.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so very much for
Thank
coming
you.
on. All right.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.